2019 was a year full of good music. Perhaps it hasn't been the most explosive, but as SoundCloud Rap winds down to a slow end of mediocre posthumous releases, and we eagerly anticipate new music from legends like Kendrick, Frank Ocean, and Travis Scott, it's hard to complain about what we got in 2019. In this video, I'm going to list my top 10 favorite releases from artists of any genre. But before we get into it, be sure to check out this video's sponsor. This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. When you sign up at the link in the description, you'll also get a free trial for Nebula, the creator-owned streaming video platform that Volksgeist is a part of. For number 25, I chose Trust in the Life Force of the Deep Mystery by The Comet Is Coming. This jazz album is colorful, energetic, and one of the best jazz pieces I've heard this year. At number 24, Picture This, a Halloween hip-hop album. Sounds goofy, right? It ended up being a sharp, confrontational piece of music with surprising political depth, and I know for sure I'll be listening to it for years. At number 23, The Lost Boy by YBN Cordae is pretty corny, but I liked it a lot anyway. It tells a good story. Cordae is a good rapper and his beats complement his flow well. Everything comes together to create a pretty exciting and interesting album that doesn't stay in one place for too long. You can easily tell where Cordae gets his influences, but his songwriting is strong enough and personal, to where I think it's entirely possible he has a long and successful career ahead of him. At number 22, the greatest downfall of rock music in the 21st century is lethargy. Sound and Fury, however, is a complete rejection of the idea that rock should stand still or mill about aimlessly in search of its glorious past. It may not be Sturgill Simpson's magnum opus, but it's great to see an experiment like this go as well as it did. Simpson is one of the few artists alive who continues to innovate in the area of Americana, and he's doing a great job. Coming in at number 22 is Brockhampton's Ginger. Brockhampton have been through a lot in the last 2.5 years, and Ginger beautifully illustrates their recovery process. The album took a lot of criticism for being too sad, but I think it's a gorgeous record. It's just not saturation, and for a lot of people that might be a problem. Brockhampton may never come together again like they did in the summer of 2017, and that's okay. They're growing up, and sometimes that also means growing apart. At number 20, Dave is only 21 years old, but his debut album Psychodrama is full of meaning and history. One of the biggest struggles experienced by UK rappers is the perception by the rest of the world that the UK isn't nearly as ghetto or hard as the US. But Dave knocks that misconception out of the park with an album that provides a systemic and a visceral look at life in the UK for young black people. It's an amazing debut for an artist who will undoubtedly continue to put his city on the map as his career progresses. In 19th place, Swans are perhaps, accurately to their name, the most animalistic band recording today. Their music speaks to parts of us that we ignore and push down in favor of constructed meaning. We prefer that which makes sense to what we experience in our everyday, and Swans couldn't represent anything further from that. Their music creeps up on you like a wolf in the forest, or pounces like a lion on the plains. It's also more complicated than that as well. Leaving Meaning is one of the most gripping installments in their catalog yet. A harsh, stabbing, glacial collection of sounds and ideas that mixes in with its animism the vicious duplicity of organized human activity, creating music that draws you in while it claws your eyes out. In 18th place, Young Thug albums are difficult. We've been waiting for a great one for a long time, but they always seem to miss the mark, and the charts by a narrow margin. But So Much Fun looked like it was finally going to break the Thugger curse and propel him to the top of the charts and the review lists. And it was successful. So Much Fun debuted at number 1 and received critical acclaim unlike any of Thugger's previous projects. While Young Thug may not be as confusing or as out there as he once was, So Much Fun is still an excellent record, and Thugger still manages to evolve his raps and rhymes with each passing project. In 17th place, Big Thief doesn't really do anything revolutionary beside make good music. Folk rock, and folk in general, is pretty stale at this point. After a renaissance earlier in the decade, we need a break from it. It's become kitschy and corny to make music about rolling hills and fresh-baked bread. But UFOF is so well composed, so well performed and written, that it breaks through the current slump of its genre and makes folk interesting again. For number 16, I chose The Sailor by Rich Brian. Rich Brian's origin story in the rap game is one of the most interesting we've heard in recent memory. But until The Sailor, his music had never been considered quite as interesting as his backstory. The Sailor, however, is a huge improvement in terms of songwriting, production, and presentation. The album flows nicely as a whole and explores different styles with ease. At number 15, Anima is a creation that comes directly from the mind of Thom Yorke. It was conceived after a period of persistent anxiety and creative block. Yorke used layers of electronic fuzz and deconstructed noise to create a dystopian atmosphere that reflects his own struggle with anxiety. Anima is a self-contained universe, a box of stars and planets and cosmic dust represented by wraith-like frequencies and otherworldly pulsing. Only Thom Yorke could be responsible for something as strange as this, and only he will truly ever understand it. In 14th place, Injury Reserve is a trio that made it from nothing. They come from a city with no rap scene, and they themselves have no real business in the rap game. Their origin story is one of unlikely creativity and a DIY attitude, having recorded their first mixtape in a dentist's office. The Injury Reserve sound can perhaps be best summed up as a mix between Death Grips, Brockhampton, and Aesop Rock. Is it boundary pushing or experimental? Not necessarily, but that doesn't stop it from being enjoyable and genuine. Sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel to make good music. All you need is to tell a good story and make music that flows, and I think that's exactly what Injury Reserve does best. Flying Lotus earned his status as a legend many years ago, with projects like Cosmogramma and You're Dead. Flamagra isn't just another shot at a classic album, but rather a collection of moments that aim to exhibit creativity and a variety of different ideas. There was a good portion of Flylo's fanbase that didn't like this album too much at all, and considered it creatively lazy. But I think it's still an amazing show of creativity and atmosphere. You don't have to compare all music to what the artist did immediately before, because while 2014's You're Dead may be a career-defining record, Flamagra is still an album full of creative melodies, beats, and features galore. Flying Lotus is a master of his craft, and Flamagra doesn't even hint at him becoming complacent with that title. Flying Lotus is a master of his craft, and Flamagra doesn't even really begin to hint at him becoming complacent with that title. The combination of Freddie Gibbs' straight-shooting gangster rap and Madlib's moody, stylistic production is powerful. Bandana is their second collaboration together, and they're only getting better. Freddie Gibbs rides the beats like a veteran surfer on his favorite beach, making rapid maneuvers to keep up with Madlib's dynamic production. The album is just pure connection between producer and rapper in a way that we don't see particularly often in today's hip-hop climate. Freddie Gibbs and Madlib have hit a sweet spot. Bandana is incredibly consistent. It's exactly what it wants to be and nothing more. It's beautiful. Bon Iver is always changing. If it weren't for Justin Vernon's falsetto, 2007's For Emma would be completely indistinguishable from I. That's because vocals have been, and remain to this day, Bon Iver's most recognizable asset. That's not to say that the instrumentals aren't special too, because they are. It's just that even Bon Iver's backing tracks have come to be composed in part by layered vocals and vocal samples. However, on I, Bon Iver finally lifts the veil of cryptic poetry and symbolism he's been gradually weaving for the last 10 years, at least partially. It's a beautiful album, and without a doubt, his most forthright. On I, Justin Vernon has found peace. He's not running or hiding. He's just existing. Pop theology can be infuriating. The way that artists, musicians in particular, tend to come up with smug, self-serving religious justification for their own inadequacies and biases is especially annoying to watch. IDK's major label debut, Is He Real?, at first glance looks like another mediocre attempt by a musician to examine or talk about religion and reinforce their own personal biases while they do so. Instead, Is He Real ended up being one of my favorite hip-hop albums in recent memory because of the way IDK leaves things open-ended. Is He Real may not be a future classic like IDK claims it is, but it's definitely a fresh sound and it presents a lot of interesting ideas that aren't smug or self-serving. IDK, by the way, stands for Ignorantly Delivering Knowledge. FKA Twigs has always been serious with her craft. She works hard and it shows clearly in everything she releases. Magdalene is her most serious work yet, her most intricately crafted work yet. The instrumentals are massive yet minimal, and it ends up sounding like Twigs is the hero of her own sci-fi epic, piloting a stately spaceship by herself, immeasurably far away from the nearest sign of life. Magdalene is beautiful, melancholic, and far away. FKA Twigs' universe is not our own. It's a world of original creativity, measured beauty, and quiet danger. Magdalene contains many of the best songs of the last decade. Listening to Nick Cave isn't something you just do. It's a challenge you take on when you want to be shaken to your core. His music triggers our primal fears. It returns us to moments long forgotten and shows us moments that won't come for a long time in the future. After his son Arthur died in 2015 while tripping on acid, Nick Cave's life and his music was changed forever. Ghosteen makes heavy use of drones, sparse piano, choral harmonies, and synths to create an ethereal, surreal atmosphere that complements the album's subject matter of life, death, mourning, and trauma. It's an album that, if caught at the right time, can stay with you for days, haunting your moments of reflection. Ghosteen communicates a deep, universal sadness. It's a heartbreaking album that warns us in its cold, distant beauty that nothing should be taken for granted, ever. I thought Tyler, the Creator, would never top Flower Boy. It was an album full of emotional honesty, beautifully composed instrumentals, and awesome lyrical storytelling. Then Igor dropped, and it was all of that and more. Igor is peak Tyler, the Creator in a way that we didn't even know Tyler was capable of. It features the least amount of actual rapping that Tyler's ever done on a project so far, and that makes sense. Tyler is slowly outgrowing hip-hop, instead replacing it with a new brand of psychedelic neo-soul. Igor's compositions are intricate, its concept is touching, and Tyler is clearly growing up. It's a special album that's going to be remembered as one of Tyler's most important musical statements. I think Igor's true strength is in its production. Tyler's vocals are fairly rough, but he complements them perfectly, with fuzzy, melodic sing-song production. Perhaps Igor didn't speak to me as much as some other albums that came out this year, but it's an undeniable masterpiece for Tyler, the Creator. Danny Brown is almost 40. He didn't break out into the rap game until he was almost 30. But he's not old, and his latest album, You Know What I'm Saying, proves that without a doubt. Danny's always been hard to place. He's always held his own court and occupied his own corner of the game, and this year's record is no exception to that idea. There are a few interesting changes to his rapping and creative choices. He's definitely less of a hyena than he usually is. On this album, he melts into the beats rather than jumping out of them like a horror movie creature. Danny sounds more natural and more musical than ever before. It's a fun album, it's definitely his most listenable music yet, and I'm happy to hear him continue to evolve and reject the idea that rappers have to slow down and take a backseat as they age. He's more dialed in than ever, and this may very well be my favorite work of his yet. I've always loved Denzel Curry and the music he puts out, but Zoo ended up being something of a curveball after a deep conceptual album like Taboo. I think we all expected something more along those lines, and instead we got one of the best trap albums of the decade. Zoo embodies the trap spirit of the 2010s without any of its classic pitfalls like a boring, drawn-out track list or flat, uncreative songwriting. The album is only 29 minutes long, but it packs in an inspiring tale of Denzel's youth in South Florida and what his home means to him. It feels almost like Zoo is an album Denzel's been wanting to make for a long time, and he only just now had the opportunity to do it. Denzel's music has never exactly fallen in line with the South Florida binary of Kodak Black and Lil Pump, but he's still a contender for the best artist to come out of that scene in the last 10 years. Zoo is funny, exciting, and further proves that Denzel Curry is nothing if not dynamic. James Blake's fourth album takes fifth place. Assume Form presents a few big changes for James Blake, while also remaining authentic to the sound he's crafted over the last decade. The first half of Assume Form incorporates a number of collaborations that reflect Blake's gradual evolution into being a favorite producer and writer for numerous hip-hop artists over the last few years. James Blake has worked with Frank Ocean, Kanye, Travis Scott, Kendrick Lamar, and Andre 3000 repeatedly. Assume Form takes that experience and weaves it in with Blake's organic production and song structure, creating a flavor of hip-hop that sounds equal parts ambient and mainstream. Metro Boomin provides production for 2 tracks on the album, and even those cuts have a sound that's much more laid back than his usual output. Assume Form is one of James Blake's best projects to date, thanks to the way it flows together seamlessly, like the musical version of a raging river caught by a camera set to long exposure. Billie Eilish is just really fucking talented. Her music is divisive. People love arguing about it online. But no matter whether you enjoy it or not, it just sounds so good. Billie and her brother Phineas have such a clean, well-oiled creative process. It makes their music sound like it was conceived by producers and writers far older than themselves. Billie is quickly becoming an icon if she isn't one already. 45 million Instagram followers at 17 years old, that's going to be hard to beat. Like I said, while her talent is clear, hardcore music fans remain divided on whether or not Billie is worth her weight in salt. But you can't help but wonder if he even matters at all. Billie is so ridiculously successful, it seems to be the case that she represents a new kind of good music that her haters just can't understand yet. Only time will tell, but Billie's debut looks like a new breed of pop. Dark, bass-heavy, and understated. We can't do much but hope that she lives up to her potential and avoids the pitfalls of child stardom. NFR is Lana Del Rey's masterpiece. It's what she's been working towards for the last 7 or 8 years since the release of Born to Die. Between then and now, she's definitely taken some detours, some of which paid off and some of which didn't. But Norman fucking Rockwell sums up the themes she's danced with for her entire career, without the ridiculous over-stylization of Born to Die and Ultraviolence that made them a niche product, or the overly drawn-out, sludgy pace of Honeymoon and Lust for Life that made them her weakest records and a mid-career low point. NFR features majestic arrangements, effortless vocals, and soft, mellow instrumental choices. It's an album with a consistent message. It's not overbearing, and the key to enjoying it is to appreciate each of the small moments that come together to make up a true modern classic of the 2010s. Lana Del Rey is a defining artist of the last decade, and she deserves every ounce of praise that's been thrown at this album. The main idea between Natalie Merring's Titanic Rising is that reality is collapsing, or at least the reality that makes sense to us. This concept evokes comparisons to Father John Misty, but unlike Misty, who revels in the destruction of everything around him with absurd glee, Merring faces the apocalypse with a calmer demeanor. Her and Misty share a color palette as well, 70s soft rock instrumentation mixed in with a few modern ideas and concepts. But Titanic Rising has a sense of sincerity and idealism that Misty could only ever dream of. Merring hopes for the best but doesn't lie to herself. Titanic Rising is existential. It's an exploration of the galaxies that exist within our heads, and it's escapism without forgetting. The album is spacious. It's subtle yet grand. It's timeless yet painfully relevant. It wears its influences on its sleeve while sounding wholly original. Titanic Rising is one of the best albums, not only of the year, but of the decade. It offers answers to our deepest existential fears of environmental collapse, growing up as individuals, love and loneliness, technology and consumerism. Weyes Blood is an immensely talented cultural commentator whose music will go down in history as some of the best to come from the last decade. The imagery, the meaning, and the emotion on Titanic Rising makes it my favorite album of the year. It's an answer to our generation's fears, a satellite floating through space, a sunbeam on the ocean floor. Titanic Rising is a helping hand in the darkness, and it's my favorite album of 2019. Any longtime Volksgeist viewer has heard of CuriosityStream. They're the home to thousands of documentaries and nonfiction titles about history, technology, nature, science, and more. They present one of the best streaming deals available at just $19.99 a year or $3 a month. But now this deal has gotten even better, because CuriosityStream has bundled with Nebula. Nebula is a streaming site that I myself am involved with building. New Volksgeist videos go up on there completely ad-free, but more importantly, the thing that really makes Nebula special are the exclusive originals. For example, my good friend Polyphonic has a fantastic series about Led Zeppelin, and there will even be a Volksgeist Nebula original out soon, say in the next month or so. Lots of your favorite creators like Mr. Amazing, Middle 8, and Polyphonic are already on Nebula, and signing up directly supports the educational creator community without the algorithms and AdSense guidelines and frustrating copyright system. So you can get access to CuriosityStream and Nebula for free for a month by going to curiositystream.com/Volksgeist and entering the code Volksgeist. The comet is coming. Trust in the life